When two families were murdered within a week of each other, there was seemingly no connection between the two. Yet the truth was, one of the victims was not only a victim, she might have been the mastermind of all of the murders. So how did she end up tortured and murdered with the rest of them? You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, and today's case goes into the Richmond Spree murders, where there were two families brutally killed, and then there were robberies happening all the time, and then it turned out that the killers were actually killing before that, and so more murders were connected to them. So we're just going to get into this. So it was 2006 in Virginia, and the Harvey family lived in Richmond. Now this was 49-year-old Brian and 39-year-old Catherine, who had two daughters, Stella, who was 9, and Ruby, who was 4. Now Catherine owned a local toy store, and Brian was actually the lead singer of a college rock band called House of Freaks. Stella was attending Fox Elementary School at the time, and Ruby was just a 4-year-old sweet little girl. And they were a very well-known, very loved and respected family. But on January 1st, around 1:45 p.m., the Richmond Fire Department were dispatched to their home because one of their friends had arrived to their home to see smoke coming out of the house. When firefighters arrived, the home was filled with black smoke and there was very low visibility. Now, once the fire was actually extinguished enough to get inside, bodies would be found in the basement. One adult and one child was removed from the home. However, this had not been a rescue mission. There was no saving them. And while carrying these bodies out, firefighters found that the bodies showed evidence of battle signs, and they had bound extremities. This is when the police were obviously summoned, and they knew that a fire wouldn't have caused those injuries. Mom and daughter Catherine and Ruby had been found, but nobody knew if the rest of the family were still inside, and everybody was hoping that they weren't. Detective Dwyer would arrive at the scene and went into the basement to look for more victims, and that is when he would find another child underneath the futon with her hands behind her back and tape over her mouth. She too was deceased, and this was believed to be the oldest daughter, Stella. Then the father, Brian, was found on the floor bound with electrical cord on his wrists and ankles. He had a large gash in his neck, and tape was melted over his mouth. There appeared to be no signs of a break-in or a robbery, though one of their wedding rings was missing from their fingers. Now, in the basement, there was also 2 claw hammers found near the bodies, as well as broken wine bottles, a knife handle, and a knife blade. An art easel was also tipped over, and it was found that this could be the fire's point of origin. Unfortunately, due to the fire that the Richmond Fire Department had to put out, investigators knew that most of the evidence here had been washed away with their hoses, and so there wasn't going to be much to go on. And Detective Lisa Beadle said that she saw evil when she walked into that crime scene, and police and firemen alike were outside crying. There was tears streaming down their faces after they had seen all of this. Now, the Harvey family actually threw an annual New Year's Day party, and it just so happened that that was the same day. They were planning to have the party that afternoon, and their first guest had actually showed up at their house. That was the friend who called 911 and had seen the smoke. Investigators were then spoken to by a friend of the family named Kirsten, who claimed that she had actually spoke to the family that day. You see, she had gone to their home to drop their oldest daughter, Stella, off because Stella had been at her home for a slumber party with her daughter. And so they arrived at the home, and Kirsten said they knocked on the door and Catherine would open the door, but she appeared jittery and nervous and pale. When she was asked, "Are you okay?" Catherine allegedly said that she just wasn't feeling very good. And this is when Stella went inside, but also Kirsten's daughter tried to go inside to play with Stella more, and Catherine actually stopped her from coming inside. Now, when Kirsten asked Catherine if everything really was okay, Catherine allegedly put one of her hands up to her head as though it was a gun and kind of made circles as though she was saying someone or something was crazy. And after that, she was just saying that she was feeling unwell, and Kirsten asked if there was anything that she could do. And then she offered to come over early to help set up the party later, and Catherine agreed to this. and so Kirsten and her daughter left. Now, this was not long before the smoke would be seen and the bodies would be found. Now, medical examiner Dara Trekla said that he had begun the autopsies a day later and that he had never faced anything like that before. Brian had his neck cut 8 times, but that didn't kill him. Catherine was cut on the neck 3 times, but that didn't kill her either, and she was also cut once on the back. This was torture because Catherine and Brian's cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head. They had both been beaten to death with claw hammers struck in the head multiple times. Now, the oldest daughter, Stella's neck was cut 6 times, and due to her small size, this had hit her trachea and esophagus, and the blows to the head with the hammer caused her brain to actually show outside of her skull. And it was determined that she not only died from the blunt force trauma, but also from the smoke inhalation due to the fire. The youngest, Ruby's throat was also cut, hitting her trachea, and the hammer also caused her brain tissue to show. But she had died of stab wounds to the back, including one that went through her ribs and actually punctured her lung, and also the blunt force trauma to the head. The Harvey family was a family committed to the city that they lived in, and with the news of their murder, a whole city mourned. There were said to be over 1,000 people at their service at Byrd Theater, and that is when the fear set in, and residents began to buy big dogs and guns. They wouldn't answer the door for anybody. They were locking up their doors, unlike they did before. And the traces of blood on the knife found in the basement matched all 4 family members. It was theorized by investigators that these killers or this killer had unlocked the door of the Harvey family home and forced Catherine, Brian, and Ruby down into the basement. At this time, Stella was still at her friend's house, and so while the killers began to tie up these 3 family members, there was a knock on the door, and that is when investigators believed that they forced Catherine to go upstairs, telling her that they would kill her entire family if she didn't pretend that everything was okay, so she headed up to get Stella. It was believed that once Catherine and Stella got back down to the basement, Catherine was the first one to have her throat cut, and then the rest of the family. Then they were beaten over the head to make sure they were dead, and after this killer or killers believed that they were deceased, they then poured the bottles of wine on the easel and set it on fire. Though at this point no leads were panning out, there weren't many witnesses who had seen anything, and then 2 days later, on January 3rd, the police were called to Chesterfield, Virginia, which was about 25 minutes away, and a couple claimed that they had been robbed in their home and that 2 men and 1 woman had come to the door and asked for directions before forcing themselves inside. They stole a computer, a TV, and about $800 in cash. The husband claimed that these people tried to tie them up. However, he began talking about how his wife was disabled and that he needed to help her, and they actually left them untied. So they got the stolen goods, and these 2 men and this woman allegedly then fled, and that is when the couple called 911. But again, suspects weren't seen and they weren't caught. Then another 3 days after that, on January 6th, also in Chesterfield, another 911 call was made. This time, this was a woman who believed that her daughter's friend may be dead inside of her home. She said that Ashley Baskerville, a 21-year-old, hadn't been returning any of their calls, and they were concerned about her. Police were dispatched to Ashley's home, where she stayed with her mother and her stepfather on Broad Rock Road, and 21-year-old Ashley, as well as her mother, 47-year-old Mary Baskerville, as well as her mother's boyfriend, who was 55-year-old Percival Tucker, were found inside the home. All were found bound with what appeared to be plastic or plastic bags wrapped around their heads, and Percival and Mary had also been cut across their throat. It was believed that this family was tortured as well, and it seemed eerily similar to the murders that had happened 5 days prior. Their home appeared to be ransacked, and their family car was missing, though there were no signs of forced entry once again. And looking into this family, investigators found that Percival was a forklift driver, Mary worked at a dry cleaning business, and they were said to be nice, outgoing people. Ashley was said to be a sweet, loving girl who was very close to her family. And there was seemingly no connection between the Baskerville Tucker family and the Harvey family. Even though they were killed in such a similar manner, these 2 families didn't appear to be connected at all. And investigators and the community alike were beginning to theorize that this was a serial killer in the area. and that they were not going to stop. Now, the same ME, who was Dr. Darren Trekla, would be performing these autopsies as well, and he revealed that Purcell's head was actually covered with saran wrap, but he had a sock stuffed in his mouth, and it was also taped shut. The most likely theory was that he had struggled to breathe for several minutes before passing. Mary had also been gagged with tape over her eyes. She had 4 cuts on her neck and her chest from a knife, and she too died from suffocation. However, Ashley had a plastic bag over her head that was taped down with duct tape around her neck, and on top of that, her entire face was wrapped in duct tape, and she too was gagged. Ashley died of suffocation just like her mother and her stepfather, and it was said that each of them took about 5 to 7 minutes to pass away. The community had no idea if this was going to continue, if their family was next, but thankfully, the very next day, 2 men would be arrested in Philadelphia. Now, this case was stranger than fiction and nothing like it seemed. These weren't actually 2 completely random families in regards to the connection to the killers. You see, when the Baskerville Tucker family were sent in for autopsies, Ashley was found to have a necklace around her neck. And this had a ring on it. And this ring looked eerily similar to the wedding ring missing from the Harvey family home. The initials BH were also engraved in it. These 2 cases were connected in a way nobody expected. While the Baskerville's stolen car, the Chevy Blazer, was being tracked down at this time, trying to find where this missing car had gone, believing that the killers had taken it, investigators decided to question the 911 caller who claimed that she was the mother of Ashley's friend to get more information on why she ended up calling the police, because she was correct in believing that Ashley was dead. Now, this mother was spoken to, but her daughter, Ashley's friend, was also spoken to, and this was a woman named LaToya, and she would inform the police that she had been hanging out with Ashley that day and that they were also with 2 of Ashley's friends who were male. And they were all actually staying at LaToya's mom's house, and her mom had heard these men talking about robbing people, and then she ended up looking into one of their duffel bags which had hammers and different tools for robbery. Now, a week later, these men had left LaToya's mom's home. These 2 men and Ashley were still talking about needing money, and that is when LaToya said that Ashley spoke up and said that her stepdad kept money in the house. Now, Ashley was said not to get along very well with her stepdad, so it didn't surprise anyone that she was willing to steal from him, but her plan was quite evil. LaToya said that the group began talking about actually tying Ashley up and demanding a ransom from the stepfather. And at this point, LaToya actually went home. She wanted nothing to do with it. She said that she knew Ashley because they had gotten out of jail around the same time together. That's really all she knew about her, so she didn't want to be involved. And LaToya believed that they went off that day to act on that plan. However, hours later, these 2 men showed back up at her mother's home, and Ashley wasn't with them. And when LaToya pressed them on this, the men allegedly told her that she had gone bye-bye. That day, Ashley and her mother and stepfather were found deceased. LaToya then gave up the identities of these 2 men, who were Ricky Gray and Ray Dandridge, and investigators asked if she would actually be willing to call Ray and get him to confess. And so they recorded the conversation. She agreed to do this, and she asked him what happened to Ashley. And at this point, he said that they didn't have to worry about her anymore. Then there was a hit on the Baskerville Tucker's Chevy Blazer that was stolen from their home. And when investigators were given the names of these 2 men, they began looking deeper into the lives of Ricky and Ray. They were found to both be 28-year-olds born 2 months apart and were actually uncle and nephew. Ricky was Ray's uncle. They were from Philadelphia, where some families still lived, including Ray's father, Ronald. And believing that they were headed back to Philadelphia, the Chesterfield police contacted Philadelphia police and asked them to be on the lookout for this certain car, as well as staking out the relatives' addresses. You see, both of these men had a criminal record. Ray had served more than 10 years for armed robbery with use of a firearm and had recently been released. And Ricky had served several different times in 1996 for robbery, in 2000 for distribution of cocaine, and in 2002 for possession of cocaine. And that is when Philadelphia police got back to Chesterfield police, saying that they believed that they knew where these men were. And so Philadelphia police obtained a search warrant, and on January 7th of 2006, the SWAT team stormed the residence. They immediately found Ray, who surrendered upon seeing them, got on the ground. However, they had to search for Ricky, and ultimately he was found in the basement hiding behind a water heater. And as they arrested him, he allegedly said, "Can I tell you my side of the story?" Both men were then taken to the Philadelphia Police Department. Only an hour later, Ray actually confessed to killing Ashley and her mother and her stepdad. And then 12 hours later, Ricky made a 3-long-page confession after hearing that Ray was confessing. And he admitted to the murders of the Harvey family, saying that he was high on PCP at the time. And then he said, "I don't believe sorry is strong enough. None of this was necessary." Ricky said that it was a real nasty scene when they were cutting their throats, and that the Harvey family kept trying to get up and it was scaring him. And then he saw the hammer and he allegedly began to hit them until no one was moving. He said the parents watched as their daughters were killed, and that during this time Ray was actually scavenging the house for items to steal, and that they took a plate of cookies, wine, and computers. But now, between these two men, they had confessions for the Harvey family murders as well as the Tucker Baskerville family murders. But that's not where it was going to stop, because the murders of Brian, Catherine, Stella, and Ruby, as well as Ashley, Mary, and Perciel, were not the only murders that these two men committed. Shockingly enough, Ricky Gray had also confessed at this time to murdering his wife a year prior to this. It was actually in 2005, but it was only 3 months before the murders and the spree occurred. You see, on November 5th of 2005, Treva Gray had been found bludgeoned to death and buried in a shallow grave at 35 years old. Now, her husband of 6 months, Ricky Gray, was questioned at that time, mainly due to the fact that Treva's parents believed that Ricky and Treva had fought all the time, and that also they had seen claw marks on Ricky's arms the day she was found. They also told the police that Ricky's nephew, Ray, had moved in with them shortly before. Investigators questioned Ricky and Ray at the time, however, they were not considered suspects. Ricky told the police he hadn't seen his wife in several days. Now, Treva's parents believed that investigators didn't do much as far as investigating her death because they believed that she had died of a drug overdose. Her death was ruled as suspicious, but there was no investigation launched until her husband confessed, after confessing to other murders as well. Ricky Gray admitted to bludgeoning his wife with a lead pipe with the help of Ray Dandridge. But after their arrest for the murder spree in 2006, they didn't admit to this attack, but a man would come forward saying that he had been attacked by Ricky and Ray. This was 26-year-old Ryan Carey, and he said on December 31st, 2005, almost 2 months after they killed Ricky's wife, and a day before they killed the Harvey family, he had been attacked in his parents' driveway. He said he arrived there and they started beating him and stabbing him, and he said that he spent 2 weeks in a coma, recovering. There were stab wounds in his chest and his arms and his neck. He had escaped these men and had gotten to his parents' front door, who called 911, but this was a near fatal assault, and he was recovering for 2 months in the hospital, and he ended up permanently losing use of his right arm. He would identify Ricky and Ray as his attackers when he saw them on the news. When this came out, Ricky then admitted to this attack, and he also admitted to the Tucker Baskerville family murders because he had only talked about the Harvey family murders in his confession. And so with these confessions from Ricky, Ray was given a plea deal saying that if he also confessed in the involvement of the Harvey killings, he would get a lesser sentence. He accepted this after hearing that Ricky had already told the police about it. And so both men were confessing to both of the family murders. But the next day on January 8th, another accomplice would be named. You see, Ashley Baskerville, who was formally identified as a victim prior to this, was named as a participant in the Harvey family murders, as well as the Chesterfield robbery and the robbery at her home of the Tucker Baskerville family that led to her own family's murders. You see, in their confessions, Ricky and Ray explained that Ashley was Ricky and Ray's girlfriend. Basically, she was with both. Some sources say that she was with Ricky, some say that she was with Ray, others say that she was kind of with both. Either way, she was dating one or both of these men at the time. And on January 1st, when they headed to the Harvey family home, Ashley was with them. And they had found the door to their home open. Ashley actually used to babysit for the Harvey family, knew they were well off, and offered them up for the robbery to Ricky and Ray. She ended up giving them the full layout of the Harvey home, and she did stay in the car during the murders. Ricky and Ray said she acted as a lookout as they held the family captive and threatened to kill them all before they did. Now, Ricky and Ray said that once the whole family was in the basement, they realized that they had seen their faces, and that is when they decided to kill them and set the house on fire to destroy evidence. They then went outside, and Ashley acted as their getaway driver, and Ricky then gave her the stolen wedding ring. Now, when it came to the murder of her mother and her stepfather, Ashley had allegedly chosen to pose as a victim and be bound by Ricky and Ray so they could rob this family and it would not look like she was involved. Except Ricky and Ray claimed that things just went wrong, and Ricky allegedly got tired of Ashley and she was asking for more money, a bigger cut basically, and so they decided to kill her and take her parents' car. This daughter had helped her boyfriend kill another family and then let him inside her family's home where they were all murdered. Ricky admitted that when he wasn't untying Ashley, she was panicking. She was fighting back and he could see the fear in her eyes. You see, Ashley Baskerville had started to have behavioral problems in high school. Her mother and stepfather could not stop her from hanging out with the wrong crowd. She started sneaking out. She was stealing cars. She was experimenting with drugs. And she had even been arrested on federal drug possession charges. And at 21, she was released, and her family believed she wanted to do better for herself. She was getting back into nursing school. But then she met Ricky and Ray and would end up murdered after 6 other victims that she was involved in the murders of. It was all so twisted and sick, and no one could believe what she had done and how she had been involved. On February 9th of 2006, Ricky Gray was charged with 5 counts of capital murder of the Harvey family. Now, these charges were for killing more than once in a 3-year period, for committing more than one killing in a single act, for killing in commission of a robbery, and there were also 2 charges for killing a child under 14. He then pled not guilty. Now, Ray Dandridge was charged with 3 counts of capital murder for the Tucker Baskerville murders, and he also pled not guilty. The prosecution believed that they had more of a chance of finding each man guilty if they each had one of the family murders, though they did believe that both men were involved with both crimes. Now, Ricky's trial started in August of 2006, and during the trial, evidence was revealed for the cases that these men were connected to, and it was revealed that Ricky had actually given the police the location where the stolen items from the Harvey residence could be found, as well as a pair of boots that he had worn the day of the murders. And on these boots, Brian and Stella's blood was found. In the Tucker Baskerville murders, Ricky's car was found 3 blocks from their home because they had stolen the family's car instead and left his car there. The officer who found and arrested Ricky Gray, named James Jonas, testified that Ricky was hiding behind the water heater and he smirked at him when he asked him to show him his hands. Ricky then showed one hand, which obviously concerned the officer, thinking that he had some sort of weapon, and Ricky then punched him, resisted arrest, tried to fight back, assaulted the officer's partner, grabbed his gun, but eventually they were able to subdue and arrest Ricky. Now, interestingly enough, Ricky's mother, Barbara, would testify about his childhood. She explained that she and Ricky's father, Ellsworth, lived together with their 2 children, as well as Ellsworth's 2 children from another relationship. She said that Ricky was a troublemaker in school, that he was disruptive, he was hyper, and he struggled to learn to read. Barbara said that Ricky wet himself most nights, and this was up until he was 13 years old. But due to this, Ellsworth, the father, would often use a horse strap to spank Ricky, and Ricky was said to be blamed by all of his siblings anytime Ellsworth would beat them. Now, Barbara did admit that one of Ellsworth's friends had actually sexually assaulted 2 of their children, though she said Ricky was not one of the victims. Barbara was said to join the army around the time of his teenage years, and during that time his father had full custody, and he then became a cocaine addict. Ricky was then said to be sexually abused by his stepbrother Fitzgerald, and their father was eventually sent to prison for drug charges. And so Barbara got the kids back and they moved to Pennsylvania. But at 17 years old, Ricky moved out on his own. Now, Ricky was said not to actually confide in his mother much on what had happened growing up. So it was said that his sister Ava knew more, and she would testify as well, saying that Ricky was sexually abused by their stepbrother Fitzgerald when he was only 4 years old, and that she was a victim as well, and that it continued up until they left the house. Ava said that Ricky was using drugs at 13 years old, but neighbors back then said that he got along well with everyone and he went by the nickname Cooley. But this was the defense's argument for leniency. They believed that Ricky had a childhood full of drugs and abuse, and this is what caused the crimes, and his lawyers claimed he went through sexual slavery and should be spared the death penalty. However, after 30 minutes of deliberation, Ricky was found guilty and the jury recommended death for the murders of 9-year-old Stella and 4-year-old Ruby. They also wanted life sentences for the other 3 charges. He was then sentenced to death. Now, the next month, Ray Dandridge's trial would begin. Now, although he had been pleading not guilty, 3 days into proceedings, Ricky ended up pleading guilty to avoid the death penalty. And so he was sentenced to 3 life sentences without parole. And I wish that this is where this case ended, but it just keeps getting crazier and more convoluted from here. Because 3 months after this, in December of 2006, Ricky Gray, who was already on death row, was charged with another murder. And this was 37-year-old Cheryl Warner, who had been hanged by an electrical cord in the basement of her home on December 18th of 2005. The house was then set on fire. Cheryl's autopsy revealed that her cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. She was said to be a legal secretary, and she had 3 children who were only 13, 10, and 8 at the time. Now, because of the similar MO to the Harvey family murders, they believed that Ricky could be involved. However, he pled not guilty once again. And then this did not go to trial due to contradictory evidence. This was allegedly DNA from the crime scene of Cheryl's murder that didn't match Ricky, as well as cell phone records that allegedly ruled him out. Her case continued to be investigated. And in 2014, investigators released video footage from the day of her murder, and she had been shopping at the Belk store in Culpeper County, Virginia. And as she left, the camera caught a man opening the door for her, having a brief conversation, and then she left. So police wanted help in identifying this man. Cheryl's father had told police that he was on the phone with her that very day. They were just having a normal conversation when a man knocked on Cheryl's door. She went to answer it and told her father that a man was there who was having car trouble and needed to use her phone and that she would call him later. She didn't, and she ended up being found murdered. Now, witnesses in the area did report a suspicious vehicle in that area that night, and police told the public that this killer was no stranger to violence and that he was probably prone to violent outbursts to those who knew him best. It was believed that this killer had not worked alone, that he was not there alone that night, and so the police were also asking for a second person to come forward, and they said that the police will protect that second person. They even offered them leniency just to come forward. But since then, nothing has come from this. That man wasn't identified, and nothing more has been announced to the public. Some continue to have the belief that Ricky and his known accomplice Ray committed Cheryl's murder due to the similar MO of the home invasion, the fire to cover up the murder, but others have pointed to an unknown killer or stalker that has been deemed the Route 29 stalker in Virginia. This is a stalker who has been said to flag down women driving down US Route 29 in Virginia and asking them for help when they have broken down. Many women are said to have vanished along this highway, and Cheryl actually lived along this highway. Now, this stalker and possible killer has never been identified, and Cheryl's case has not been connected to this killer, nor has it been solved. The Route 29 stalker case is baffling and a huge mystery, so if you want me to cover that in full, just let me know, but it will have to be a separate video. But many believe that Cheryl could be another one of the victims as well, and a lot of cases of, stalkers or killers on certain highways can be that this is one serial killer, but it also can be that it is multiple serial killers using this highway as a dumping ground or as a place to obtain victims. So yeah, let me know if you want a case on that. But if you have information in Cheryl's case, please contact investigators. The numbers will be down below as well as on the screen. Any little detail you can remember will be helpful, I promise. Now, 3 years later, after many appeals, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear Ricky's case, and Ricky was part of a lawsuit that claimed that Virginia's death row was cruel and unusual and unconstitutional. Though Ricky Gray was executed on January 18, 2017, the day after the governor denied an emergency appeal. And this was after he was on death row for 10 years. He was said to be the second to last person executed in Virginia. When asked if he had any final words, he said nope, and he allegedly denied his final meal. Though before he was executed, he had created a video for clemency where he apologized to the Harvey family.
I've stolen something from the world, never left my mind, because I understand exactly what I took from the world by looking at my two sisters. I'm sorry they had to be a victim of my despair. Well, I can only hope that they'll be willing to accept my deepest apology. Remorse is not a deep enough word for how I feel. I know my words can't bring anything back, but continuously feel horrible for the circumstances that I put them through. I've robbed them from a lifelong supply of joy. I've stolen Christmas, birthdays, and Easters, and Thanksgivings, and graduations, and weddings, children. There's nothing I can do to make up for that.
Now, Ray Dandridge, who remains in prison at this time, was also interviewed by a podcast called The Unforbidden Truth, and I will leave you the link down below to the full episode, but I will give you a quick synopsis on what he was saying. Now, we don't know much about Ray's past, even though we know a lot about Ricky's. And in this interview, he talked about that he didn't have much trauma growing up, but his father was out of the picture, and that when he was in high school, he started robbing people with his uncle Ricky. He was skipping school. He didn't end up graduating. Ray seemed very open to talk about everything. He had a very calm demeanor for the type of conversations they were having about the murders. But Ray admitted that the night of Treva, Ricky's wife's murder, Ricky had talked to him about wanting to be single and be free. And then Ricky woke Ray up one night and told him to help, because that's exactly what they were doing. They were going to kill Treva, and Ray said he tried to stop Ricky, but Ricky told him that he had already beaten her, so if she survived, she would call the police and they would both go to prison. Now, Ray also talked a bit about Ashley, and they had allegedly met when Ray was still in prison through his mother. And he said that once they got out, Ashley was his girlfriend and they would hang out. But then when Ricky came into the picture, Ashley was talking about having two boyfriends, which ultimately led to their breakup, which I'm assuming is how she and Ricky got together. But he said that the robbery of the couple that had the disabled wife and the husband to save them from being tied up between the Harvey murders and the Tucker Baskerville murders, that Ashley was involved in that one too, that she had actually gone up to their door, asked for directions, got the door to open up, and then the men forced themselves in and ended up robbing them. But Ray admitted that during the two family murders, they were robbing as many people as they could. Ray also explained why Ashley was involved in the robbery at her mom and stepfather's home, and he was saying that she actually loved her mom, but she had spoken about wanting to kill her stepfather, who had allegedly sexually assaulted her as a child. And while they were robbing the mom and the stepfather, Ashley began to joke that if she didn't get more money, she would call the police. And that is when Ray said that Ricky looked at him like they had to get rid of her. And they did. When asked if they were involved in any other murders, Ray said that he had once heard about a hanging, but he didn't know much more. And of course, this does also point to Cheryl Warner's case, but still we don't have concrete proof. Ray didn't know anything more. Now, the city of Richmond actually did a lot for the Harvey family to remember them, and there was a memorial endowment to provide music, art, and performing arts enrichment in the Richmond area. They also had a Ruby's Run to raise money for the preschool she was going to, and Stella's school actually dedicated the children's garden to her. A song was even created to honor the Harvey family. There was a group called the Drive-By Truckers who wrote 2 daughters and a beautiful wife dedicated to them. The city of Richmond even named a new bridge the Harvey Family Memorial Bridge. This truly affected the entire city. I do find it quite sad, though, that so much was done for the Harvey family, and yet Mary Baskerville and Percy L. Tucker weren't given that same respect or, honor. And it's believed that that is because of their daughter who was involved in the other murders. These 2 men, with the help of a woman, killed 8 people. Possibly 9 if you believe Cheryl was one of their victims. And they'd also attacked and severely injured another victim and robbed who knows how many more. The Richmond murder spree terrified a community, and it turned out the main motive for all of this torture was simply robbery. Do you believe they murdered Cheryl? How could Ashley, who knew that her boyfriends could kill an entire family, allow them into her own family's home? Even if she had spoken about killing her stepfather, she was said to love her mom. Did she think her mom would be spared? Was she told this? What really caused them to turn on Ashley and make her another victim? Did she start to fight back after seeing or hearing or being told that her mother was dead? Did they just want one less witness? Did she really just push it too far, asking for more money? And I do have to wonder if Ricky and Ray went into this knowing that Ashley was not going to survive, but she didn't know anything about that part. I find it so chilling that when asked about Ashley, they just were so calm, and she's gone bye-bye. After they had allegedly been dating her, were at least friends with her, and she was their accomplice. There just seems to be something missing as far as how Ashley went from being practically the mastermind of who they were going to attack and how, and then letting the men actually do the dirty work, to being the one who was tortured and murdered too. Ricky and Ray have spoken about that, saying that it was just that she had asked for more money. Could it really have been that simple? I mean, if they could murder all of these people so brutally just to rob a few items, that does make sense that if she was asking for more money, they just chose to get her out of the picture. That it makes sense to their MO and their thought process, seeing what they did to other families. I mean, one family they got cookies and a computer from, and yet they took the lives of 4 people. And let me know all of your thoughts. Let me know if you want a Route 29 stalker case. Let me know if you believe that Cheryl is connected to Ricky and Ray, or at least Ricky. There are so many tragedies surrounding these men that they caused. Do you believe that Ashley was this mastermind, as some people believe? Or do you believe that she was being manipulated by her boyfriend or boyfriends, and that she was just kind of going along with what they were doing until she realized they had taken it too far? That's always a possibility as well. Although there are confessions, I don't know if we got the whole truth. Do you? But don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.